Fallout Equestria the Chrysalis, Chapter 20, Part 2. Breakfast was a quick meal of grilled carrots and boiled cabbage from Pumpkin, and then we made our way to Arclights. While he expressed confusion as to why any pony would want to go wandering around in the mines, he allowed us in, on the condition that we couldn't take any of the gemstones that his work depended on. He even assured us that there was nothing living in the tunnels, or at least not as far as he'd explored. He unlocked the gate and we entered, my flashlight and Starlight's pitbuck lighting the way. A set of cart tracks followed the slowly curving tunnel leading further into the hill. After a minute of quiet walking, we emerged into an open space. The tracks continued around a large pit with offshoots leading down tunnels. One offshoot instead ended at a lift suspended over the edge of a pit with a set of steep metal stairs leading down. Beside the top of the stairs was a small windowed structure, likely a foremayor's office.
Hey, this is a little more like it,
Star said, trotting upright to the edge of the pit to peer into the depths. The bottom was barely visible in the darkness, maybe 100 feet below, and the metal stairs wound back and forth, anchored to the edge of the pit.
It is?
I asked, but she had already turned around. She gave a short run-up before leaping and catching the edge of the small office, swinging her hind legs up in a smooth motion. She grinned in the darkness, standing atop the structure, though she had to duck her head not to knock her horn on the ceiling.
What are you doing? Having fun,
she said with a grin, trotting along the edge of the roof.
and practicing. It's kind of weird having this thing on my leg instead of around my neck. Don't want it throwing off my balance at the wrong moment.
With that, she halted, swinging her rear out over the open space, while her forehooves caught the edge of the roof and neatly slipped in through one of the windows. I trotted up to see her standing inside, looking around her. There wasn't much to see, just a bare desk, a chair, and an open and empty filing cabinet. A moment later, she was climbing out of the opposite window and back on the roof.
Yeah. I think I'll get used to this pretty quick.
The sound of hoofsteps echoed dully throughout the metal structure.
Did we have an extra flashlight? The pitbuck worked better as a light when it wasn't at ground level. I think we had an extra.
I said.
If not, I doubt Sickle's gonna use the one that we gave her. That could work.
She mused.
Okay then, let's head down.
There was a clatter of hooves as she leapt from the roof and missed the edge of the pit, falling into the void. My heart lurched as I tore away my disguise and lunged forward, but even as my transformation was finishing, I heard the impact of hooves on metal. It came skidding to a halt at the edge of the pit, wings flicking for balance. Starlight looked over her shoulder from where she stood on the stairs, and she chuckled at my wide-eyed expression.
What? Don't do that!
I said, probably a good deal more emotionally than I normally would.
Do what?
She said, smiling.
I'm just having some fun. And nearly giving me a heart attack.
I said, hopping over the edge to land beside her with a soft buzz of wings.
The structure is at least 200 years old. What if it gave out when you jumped on it?
She grinned.
Why do you think I landed right on the support?
She thumped her hoof on the metal grating where an I-beam ran beneath it.
First thing a good scavenger does in a ruin is check out how stable the place is. Look for the big supports, big solid beams, sunk deep in the rock, no signs of corrosion. Sickle could have jumped down here and I could probably take it.
I frowned as I looked at the beam, taking a moment to come up with an objection that didn't sound somewhat infantile.
Okay, just maybe a little warning next time. Hey, I'm gonna jump into this hole now.
She said, smirking. Then she reached out, playfully thumping her hoof against my chest plate.
And you know I love the armor, but seriously, I wasn't putting any thought into my transformation.
I replied, drawing a step back.
It was a bit of a panic moment. I thought I was gonna have to catch you.
She snickered.
Well, relax. I'm not gonna jump off a cliff without knowing I'll be perfectly safe. I know what I'm doing.
She followed that up by climbing up onto the railing of the stairs, balancing precariously on the thin metal bar, though she maintained her balance with no apparent effort.
Well, I can't help feel a little nervous about a wingless pony around long drops.
I said, forcing my wings to lie flat.
As if this is the most dangerous thing we've done.
She said, then grinned.
Going down.
Even with what technically could pass as a warning, I lurched again, and she fell off the railing. At least it looked like a fall at first, until the hoof that she hooked her on the rail swung her under the walkway. She dropped a good 10 feet to where the stairs doubled back, and landed with a loud clatter of hooves, while I hopped over the edge to glide down to her. She grinned as I landed on the railing nearby.
Relax, Whisper. We're here to have fun, right? Well, preferably without breaking any bones.
I said.
Nah, I'm not gonna break anything.
She hopped up onto the railing again to swing out to climb down the outside of the stairs.
Maybe some scrapes or bruises at most, but nothing serious.
It was a completely impractical way of getting down, though she made surprisingly good time. I hovered beside her as she made her way down, and the last 10 feet were covered in a single leap, producing a loud "Ugh," and she landed beside the tracks. I landed beside her, a flash of green illuminating the chamber as I retook my disguise. Starlight was shaking her pitbuck-clad leg.
You okay?
I asked.
Oh, yeah.
She said, placing her hoof down again.
Just still not used to wearing this thing like this. It's all good.
To demonstrate her point, she hopped up onto the cart tracks, walking easily while balanced on the thin strip of metal. Her balance was almost perfect, with only the rare waver. I followed along behind her on the much easier flat ground. We walked on in silence, save for the crunching of grit and gravel beneath my hooves and the soft metallic clunks from starlights. After a time, I noticed her smile fading, her ears slowly lowering. I was about to ask if something was wrong when she finally spoke.
So, you know, about last night?
I'd been wondering when it would come up again.
Yes? I just... You know... What happens now? That's up to you.
She turned to look my way, wobbling for a moment, as she continued walking.
What, you don't care?
Her tone struck me as disappointed.
Of course I care.
I replied, looking back at her.
We've only known each other for a little over a month, but we've been through a lot in that time. That sort of thing can build strong emotional connections. And even with how bad the world has gotten and how rough things have been, you're still cheerful and friendly. It's kind of an idealism I think the world could use more of. It's something I could admire. Huh.
Was all she could reply with, looking off into space as her pace slowed.
You're also one of the rare ponies that I can be completely open with. I don't have to hide things from you, so there isn't some barrier of secrecy and duty between us. Even with my closest sisters, there was still that barrier there. There's a lot of reasons why I like you, and because of all that, I want to see you happy. That's why I say it's all up to you. As long as you choose what will make you happy, I'll be happy. Really?
She asked, cocking her head as she glanced my way.
So you'd be fine with me choosing... whatever? I'm a changeling.
I said, giving a weak smile.
We're adaptable. Well, sure, but...
She paused, chewing on her lip for a moment as she continued slowly walking along the rail.
But I mean, you've gotta want something, right? Like if it was entirely up to you?
I looked down at my hooves, contemplating that question for several long, silent seconds, before finally shaking my head.
I don't know. I don't think I'm in a good place to make a decision like that right now. Right now, I'm just focused on finding my hive, and everything else is falling into the background. I know what my training suggests, but that's all about manipulating and deceiving ponies. I'd just rather just follow your lead, to be honest. I may have some thoughts and insights to share, but I'm willing to put my trust in you.
After a moment of silence, she gave a small smirk.
Just so long as I'm not jumping into deep pits?
I huffed out a weak chuckle.
As long as you give me a little more warning before doing so.
I said.
Also, that's a rather effective metaphor. Thanks?
There was a pause, as she hopped up onto a toppled minecart laid across and blocking the tracks.
It just feels like... you know, this is some huge change, and I'm not really sure what to make of it. A change, maybe.
I said.
But it doesn't have to be a big one. I know some ponies like to divide relationships up into a few very firm categories, with certain things only belonging in certain categories, but real relationships are a lot more varied.
I paused, frowning for a moment.
Plus, social pressures are much less of a concern when there's practically no society left. Score one for the apocalypse?
Starlight said, and hopped off the cart for the tracks beyond. Her hooves landed square on the trail, though one slipped off to hit the ground beside it.
Damn it.
She quickly regained her footing and continued on.
So, you're just saying, just do whatever? I'm saying do what feels right. Don't feel like you're forced to do something for whatever reason.
She mused over that for a moment.
So you'd be okay if, you know, we just kinda keep on going like we have been?
I nodded.
Yes.
She continued walking for a couple of seconds before the corners of her mouth twitched upwards.
Just maybe with the occasional, you know...
I smiled.
Sex?
Her ears pinned back in embarrassment, though her smile grew.
Yeah, that.
She shook her head.
Yeah, okay. It's still a little weird talking about that with you being a mare most of the time.
I couldn't help a little teasing.
I was the mare most of last night, too.
Her balance wavered.
Yeah, well, I was a little distracted by other things, and once you started, doing that thing with your tongue, you know, yeah, I kinda had other things on my mind.
I chuckled a little.
You know, for a pony who claims to not be into mares, you did a pretty good job of copying that tongue thing. I may have been a teensy bit worked up and excited, and...
She shook her head, nearly losing her balance again.
And anyways, I'm not into mares. I'm into you.
She abruptly halted to bring a hoof to her face.
Oh, Lotus, maybe that has to be the cheesiest thing I've ever said.
I stood there, quiet for a moment as I contemplated her. Then I stepped over, sitting beside her.
Actually, I think I understand exactly what you mean, and I'm kind of the same way.
She lowered her hoof, cocking her head as she looked at me.
When you get down to it, I'm not really into ponies.
I said. Starlight blinked a couple of times.
Haven't you slept with, like, half a dozen different ponies? 4.
I said, then quickly corrected.
Well, 5 now, but it's still true.
I pulled out my magic, transforming back to my natural form, sans armor, and raised my hoof to touch my chest.
I'm a changeling. We don't like ponies. When I think of 2 bodies touching each other, I expect them to be firm and smooth, colliding against one another. But with ponies...
I retook my earth pony, guys, and I pressed again with my hoof.
There's all this soft flesh that squishes and wobbles in all sorts of strange ways as you move. When 2 ponies come together, their bodies mush against each other all squishy and flabby, and squeeze between the hard endoskeletal structure inside of them. It's weird, alien, and kind of disturbing. Wow.
Starlight said with a flat tone.
Charming. So yeah, I'm not into ponies.
I then flashed a smile at her.
Just certain ponies.
She held her flat glare for a couple of seconds before rolling her eyes, slowly relaxing.
Okay, that's the second cheesiest thing I've ever heard.
Despite that, she smiled as her eyes returned to me.
But thanks.
I nodded. After a moment of comfortable silence, I rose to my hooves again and we continued on. We spent almost 2 hours following different tracks through the tunnels. Starlight enjoyed the sense of exploration and treated every piece of mining equipment or outcropping of crystals as her own makeshift jungle gym. Myself, I enjoyed the company and conversation. Afterwards, we took a rest in the town square, sitting on a couple of benches beside Pumpkin's place. We mostly relaxed and chatted about nothing in particular. Dazzle came by to socialize, and when she saw us dusty from the mines, offered to let us freshen up in her shower. Starlight quickly declined, but Dazzle held up a hoof.
Hooves off, I won't even be in the room. I'm not trying anything, I thought you just liked the chance to freshen up. I just asked for a couple of caps to cover the water costs.
Starlight hesitated before replying.
Maybe next time. Alright then.
Dazzle said. She remained for a while longer, trying to carry on a conversation with only minimal flirting, before eventually excusing herself and returning to the gate. Watching her walk off, her enthusiasm long since faded, I felt a little sad for her. Her chances were poor enough before, but now they seemed practically non-existent. Judging from Starlight's expression, I think she was thinking the same thing. The day was steadily progressing from relaxing to boring, when about half an hour later the town bell rang out. It was a lazy, unurgent ringing, and we could see Dazzle, who had been lying back against her cannon, sitting upright to look over the wall. A minute later, she turned to call back.
Open up!
Then she waved out over the wall.
Hey Wheels, good to see you out again!
The caravan rolled its way into town with 3 wagons, the largest of which was pulled by a pair of Brahmin. Each wagon was heaped high and accompanied by several ponies. All of the ponies carried a weapon of some sort, though only 4 looked to be guard types. Other than the pistols, I saw a couple of pipe rifles, a shotgun, and a long bolt action. That left me in the curious position of considering them lightly armed in comparison to myself and my companions. Then again, they were probably as well armed as the raiders I'd seen, and maybe even better. None of them were relying on knives or spears. While I was evaluating their capacity for survival in the wasteland, Starlight had sat up, smiling.
Hey, maybe some fresh faces will liven things up. Think we should introduce ourselves? Certainly worth a try.
I said as I rose to my hooves.
At least then we can make some sort of impression before Sickle does.
Starlight laughed and hopped up, and we went to meet the new ponies. She called out as we drew near.
Hi there!
A couple of the ponies had noticed our approach, and now one of the guard's ponies, the stallion with the shotgun, let out a low whistle. His eyes then traced over my body. Oh, Celestia above, I love this town already! The pair of stallions with their pipe rifles snickered, and one of them thumped him lightly on the shoulder before he continued. So, y'all part of the welcoming committee? He asked, grinning.
Nah.
Starlight said, smiling back.
We're just here for a few days. Thought we'd say hi.
Well, I'm glad you did, he said, turning a smile her way. It's always nice to meet a couple of fine mares. An older stallion atop the lead wagon called back. Don't go harassing the locals, Scatter. I don't want to repeat of Mareford. The other guards laughed, while Scatter's ears flicked back. Oh, that mare didn't know how to take a compliment. Besides, these 2 ain't locals. Ain't that right? The older stallion sighed. I don't care if they're local or not, just don't go causing any trouble. Especially not here, alright? He looked our way. You 2 wouldn't happen to be friends of Dazzle, would you? Seeing where Scatter's mind was going, I leaped on the opportunity and flashed a smile.
You could say that.
The older stallion smiled, with just a hint of mischievousness to his expression. But then the conversation was disrupted by an icy voice from the rear wagon.
Oh, it's about time that we got here. It's bad enough having to travel with you imbeciles, without making the trip twice as long as they should have.
We looked back to see a golden-orange pony step from the wagon, giving the vehicle one last disdainful look as she did so. Her perfectly groomed coat and elegant looks had caught Dazzle's attention, as she was leaned out over the wall to get a better view. Beside me, Starlight's voice turned icy.
Amber.
The mare in question stopped, turning to look down at us.
Oh, it's you.
She said it with a kind of bored contempt that went beyond simple loathing, expressing a feeling much like one might have towards an unsightly stain on someone else's carpet. unpleasant, undesired, and of absolutely no consequence to herself. The older stallion, who I had assumed was the caravan leader, gave a quiet snort. "Ah, y'all have met before, I take it?"
Yeah?
Starlight said, a fire rising in her voice.
She pulled a gun on us. A reasonable precaution when a group of hired killers practically forced their way into my room.
Amber said as she retrieved her saddlebags from the wagon.
Funny how you can remember that, but you can't remember my proper title. Now if you'll excuse me, I wasted all the time I intend to with you.
Without another word, she turned and walked to the far side of the wagon. Starlight snorted, muttering under her breath. "Well, glad we're done with that bitch," Scatter muttered before looking back at us, an eyebrow raised. "Hired killers?" Starlight grumbled.
That sounds so much worse than mercenary.
She frowned.
Well, mercenary sounds kind of bad too. We help ponies, just... I guess it tends to involve a lot of shooting. She hired us for a job.
I said.
It involved killing some raiders.
"Yeah?" Scatter said and smiled again. "Well, ain't nothing wrong with that. Good riddance. How many of them scum did you bag?" Starlight looked at me.
It was... what, 20? About that.
We looked back to Scatter, whose smile had disappeared. His tone no longer sounded amused, but doubtful. Wait, so the two of you took down 20 raiders? Huh?
Oh, no, not just us.
Starlight said, smiling again.
We're only half the team. Heck, the other two did more than us in that fight.
I gave a dry chuckle to emphasize my own self-deprecating statement.
I'm not even sure if I hit any of them.
Scatter was simply staring at us by now, and I enjoyed his expression of stunned disbelief. The fourth guard, with a bolt-action rifle strapped across his back, stepped past Scatter. "Well, sounds like the two of you got some pretty good tales to tell." He smiled. "So, how about when we get these wagons parked and gear stowed, we all get together and swap some stories?"
Heck yeah!
Starlight said, giving a happy little hop and grinning from ear to ear. Good to see that they're getting along just fine, or well, most of them anyway. It's sad to say that not everyone can get along, but that's just how the world works. At least Starlight has Whisper, and Whisper has Starlight. Anyway, let's get on to our bright donators. Top donators: TacoCat598, Peter Coulthard, J Tinman, Darkside, Gauntlet, and Only One Thing. Zar630, Strix, Rayden, Narwhals, Blackmoonheart, Drake Lovedragon, Pastel Skies, Austin Roland, CrazyKiller557, Stu Hex, Will, Dospo, Madman Stan, Delta Omega, Jack Hadge, RuneSlife9852, Leslie Prickett, Hunter Norman, Stephen Bingham, LineGod12, and many more wonderful people. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and live life to the fullest.